The Game Squared Network presents Sabbath Night Live!
Welcome to Sabbath Night Live. I'm Dr. Banderson. I'm the host of this show. Tonight, we are going to have three contestants go head-to-head over who knows more about the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Let's meet our contestants. Our first contestant is Ben Ledwinski. Say hi, Ben. Oh, what an interesting guy. All right, our second contestant. His name is Samuel Peak. Everybody give a round of applause for Samuel. You don't have to do that, Samuel. You can just sit down. All right, and our third contestant is Donald Garrison. Everybody give it up for Donald Garrison. Nothing. I'm joking, man. All right, let's get into those questions. What are the first 5 books of the Bible? Yes, Ben.
Genesis, Exorcist, Leviathan, numerals, do the right thing.
Wrong. What are the first 5 books of the Bible? Yes, Donald.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
Good job, Donald. You score 10 points.
Ooh.
All right.
Genesis.
All right, so our first round is in the book of Genesis. The first phrase in the Hebrew text of Genesis means in the beginning. The book of Genesis is about many beginnings, in the beginning of the universe, the beginning of man and woman, and the beginning of human sin. The beginning of God's promises and plans for salvation are also extremely prevalent in this book. The author and date of writing, Jews and Christians have alike held that Moses was the author/compiler of Genesis, the first of the 5 books of the Old Testament, known as the Pentateuch, meaning 5-volumed book. The historical period during which Moses lived is most likely that referred to in 1 Kings 6:1, which states, "The 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel was the same as the former, was about 966 BC. The latter, and thus the date of the Exodus, was about 1446 BC. The 40-year period of Israel's wanderings in the wilderness, which lasted from about 1446 to about 1406, would have been the most likely time for Moses to write Genesis. The theme and message of this book is rich and complex, but it is mainly a book of relationships between God and man, God and nature, and man and man. It stresses the fact that the one true God is sovereign over all that exists, whether good or evil. It introduces us to the way in which God initiates and enters into covenants with his chosen people, pledging his love and faithfulness to them." All right, let's get into the questions. Question 2. How many days was the creation? Yes, Sam.
7 days.
7 days, correct. You score 10 more points. What happened on each of the 7 days of creation in order?
Day 1 was light and darkness. Day 2 was the sky and the water. Day 3 was, I believe, vegetation and dry land. Day 4 was sun, moon, and stars. Day 5 was fish and birds. Day 6 was humans and land creatures. And day 7, God rested.
Good job, Samuel. All right, question 3. What caused sin to come into the world in Genesis 3?
Yeah.
Adam and Eve disobeyed God by eating the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Good job, Samuel. Another 10 points for you. All right, question 4. How did God curse Adam and Eve and the serpent in Genesis chapter 3? Yes, Donald.
Well, for Eve, he said it was going to, childbearing was going to be increasingly more painful. For Adam, he would have to work very hard to grow vegetation and just working the land in general. And for the serpent, he cursed him to be the lowest of all creatures, and crawl on his belly, eat the dust from the ground. And that's when God promised the seed that will crush the head of the serpent.
All right, good. And that mention of the crushing of the seed, or the crushing of the head of the serpent, is one of the first promises of a Savior in Genesis. Alright, question 5. The first human death is found in Genesis chapter 4. Who died, for what reason, and what was the punishment? Yes, Ben.
Raising Cane's.
Wrong.
Abel died because he was killed by Cain, and Cain killed him because he was jealous that God accepted Abel's sacrifice and not his. And Cain's punishment would be that would be difficult for him to produce plants from the ground.
Alright, good job, Samuel. Alright, question 6. Who was Noah's grandfather, and how old was he when he died? Yes,
He was
Samuel.
Methuselah, and he was 969.
Correct. Alright. What were the names of Noah's sons? Yes, Donald.
Shem, Ham, and
Donald, go ahead.
Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Yes, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Good job, Donald. Why did God choose to save Noah and his family from the flood?
Because Noah was one of the last righteous people.
Yes, Noah was one of the last righteous people. Why did God send the flood in general?
He did it to punish the wickedness of humanity.
Yes, to wipe it out. Good job. How long did it rain during the flood? Yes, Ben.
40 days.
And
40 years.
you had 40 days right. That's half a point for you.
It was
Yes, Donald?
40 days and 40 nights.
Good job, Donald. You get full marks for that. After Noah left the ark, what did he do in honor of God saving his family? Yes, Donald.
He built an altar for God.
Yes, good job. Where is Abraham from? He's from the land of Ur. Good job. Question number 2. Why did Abraham go to Egypt in chapter 12?
There was a famine.
There was a famine. Correct. Why did Sarai hate Hagar in Genesis 16:4?
because Hagar looked on her with contempt because Hagar was having Abraham's child.
Good job. Who was Hagar?
Hagar was a slave of Abraham and Sarai.
Where in the Bible does God change Abraham's name, which means exalted father, to Abraham, and what did his new name mean? Okay, this is multiple choice. A, chapter 17, father of many. B, chapter 13, large nation. C, chapter 16, greatest father. What is your answer?
My answer is C.
C. What is your answer?
A.
A.
True.
Okay. I'm sorry, Samuel, Ben, you both got it wrong. Donald, congratulations. The answer was A. How many times did God confirm his promise of giving land and many descendants to Abraham?
3 times.
3 times. Okay? Those 3 times happened in Genesis chapter 12, 15, and 17. In chapter 19, how and why did God destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Give an example of the evil there. Yes, Samuel.
God destroyed them with fire and brimstone because of their great wickedness and inhospitality.
What's an example of something more specific that they did?
Specifically, they tried to gang rape the visitors to their town.
Correct. Who were the visitors to their town?
The 2 angels who visited Lot and his family.
Very good.
Oh man, I always forget the brimstone.
Abraham has a son in chapter 21, and they name him Isaac. What does his name mean?
Isaac means laughter.
Okay, why did they name him Laughter?
Because when God explained to Abraham that Sarah was supposed to have a son, she laughed because she didn't believe it because she was old. And God kind of called her out on it.
Good job. How old are Abraham and Sarah when Isaac is born?
Abraham is 100 and Sarah is 90.
Good job. This is true or false question. Isaac had 2 sons. named
True.
named Jacob and Esau. You got it right. You got 10 points. Esau exchanged his birthright for what in Genesis 20? Donald?
Is it bread and stew?
It is bread and stew. What is Jacob's vision in chapter 28 about? Why is this vision significant?
Jacob has a vision of angels descending and ascending a giant staircase, and it's significant because it's the first time that Jacob meets God in the Bible, and God is reaffirming the covenant he made with Abraham.
Good job. Now, it was a ladder in the dream, not stairs, but I'm going to give you the points for that. Question 12. Who were the two women that Jacob married, and what did he have to do to be able to marry them? Explain what happened.
So the two girls' names were Leah and Rachel. Now, Jacob really liked Rachel and wanted to marry her. So he had to work for their father for 7 years. And after that 7 years had passed, he was given Leah instead. So in order to have Rachel, he had to work 7 more years in order to have Rachel as well.
It's funny because Jacob's name means deceiver, and he was the one that got deceived.
Oh, snap.
All right. Question 13. What does Jacob's new name, Israel, that is in Genesis 32:28 mean? Why did he get it?
Jacob's new name, Israel, means wrestles with God, and he got it because he wrestled with God.
What happened when he wrestled with God? What did God do at the
God
end?
touched his hip and put it out of joint.
Good job. Why does Israel's name matter later?
Because it's a description of how the nation of Israel wrestled with God by struggling with sin and also repentance at the same time.
Good job. Why is the story of Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38 significant?
Judah and Tamar's family establishes the lineage that would follow to Jesus.
Very good job. How many sons did Jacob have? Who was his favorite and why?
Benjamin, of course.
No, Ben.
Jacob had 12 sons altogether, and his favorite was Joseph because he was the first kid from Rachel, who was his favorite wife.
Question 17. Explain the story of Joseph that can be found in chapters 37 through 50 of the book of Genesis. Yes, Donald.
So, Joseph had 2 visions, and they were both about him being exalted over his family. And his other brothers didn't like that, so they took him and they beat him and put him in the hole in the ground. And they took his coat of many colors, put animal's blood on it, and convinced their father that Joseph had been eaten by a wild animal. And they sold him into slavery. And eventually Potiphar bought him, and he became a servant to Potiphar in his household. But Potiphar's wife, she was infatuated with Joseph and wanted to sleep with him. He refused, so she accused him of rape, and he was sent to prison. And while he was in prison, he interpreted 2 dreams from a baker and a cupbearer. And for the cupbearer's dream, he was to be set free in 3 days. But for the baker, he would be executed in 3 days. Well, 2 years after that, the Pharaoh has a dream and he needs someone to interpret it, and the cupbearer remembers Joseph and his interpretation of dreams and tells the Pharaoh about it. And so Joseph is sent to Pharaoh, he interprets the Pharaoh's dream, and it's about 7 years of plenty. The food is just abundant, and then there's 7 years of fertile land, so crops can't grow very well. So
Infertile land.
yes.
You're good.
So Joseph is made second command of all of Egypt to oversee all this, and eventually he was able to forgive his family, and his family was moved to Egypt, and they all lived in the land of Goshen, which is a completely fertile land.
All right, good job, Donald. That question was worth 30 points.
Yay, I stuttered, but I still won. We'll be right back after these messages.
For over 3,000 years here at Egyptian legal firm, also known as ELF, we've been helping clients get out of sticky legal situations. One of our first clients, a man named Joseph, was falsely accused of rape. Let's see his story.
No! Joseph, please! Don't leave me!
It may take a couple years in prison, but here at ELF, you're in good hands.
Now, back to Sabbath Night Live! Exodus!
Welcome back to Sabbath Night Live. Our second round will be over the book of Exodus. Exodus is a Latin word derived from the Greek that means to exit, depart, and describes the greatest miracle in the Old Testament record of Israel's history, the going out from Egypt and slavery. While the story of the Israelites began with Abraham in Genesis, Exodus is the history of the early years as God's chosen nation, committed to him according to the terms of the Mosaic covenant given at Mount Sinai. The book of Exodus was not intended to exist separately, but it was thought as a continuation of a narrative that began in Genesis and continues through Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Several statements in Exodus indicate that Moses wrote certain sections of the book, such as chapter 17, verse 14, chapter 24, verse 4, and chapter 34, verse 27. The New Testament also claims Mosaic authorship for various passages in Exodus. Taken together, these references strongly suggest that Moses was largely responsible for the writing of Exodus. Exodus lays out the foundation for a theology of God's revelation of his name, his attributes, his redemption, his law, and his worship. It also reports the appointment and the work of the first covenant mediator, Moses. Moses describes the beginning of the priesthood, defines the role of the prophet, and relates how the ancient covenant relationship between God and his people came under a new administration, the Sinai covenant. All right, let's get into the questions. Joseph rose to second in command of Egypt, but years later, when there had been a change in dynasties and they no longer remembered him, the Egyptians saw that the Hebrew people were growing in numbers fast. What did the Pharaoh decide to do in Exodus chapter 1?
He decided to kill all the male Hebrew babies.
Yes. Why did he decide to kill all the male Hebrew
Because
babies?
he was afraid the Hebrews would grow so large that they could help their enemies.
Mm-hmm. Now, another reason, okay, and this is just fun fact, he also had all the male babies killed so that they would have to intermarry with the Egyptian people, allowing the Egyptian people to grow also. What is the name of Moses' wife found in Exodus 2:21, and where is she from?
Zipporah is her name, and she is from the land of Midian.
Okay. Who is her father?
His name is Jethro.
What is the significance of the burning bush?
Climate change.
No.
The significance of the burning bush is that God has heard the cries of his people and he has a plan in place to redeem them.
Yes. What does God tell Moses to do during this encounter with the burning bush? And what is Moses' response?
God tells Moses to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let his people go, and Moses doesn't want to go.
Why didn't he want to go?
Because he wasn't a good speaker. He was afraid.
So what did God do to fix that?
God showed him some miracles, and then God also allowed Aaron to speak for him.
Good job. Pharaoh was associated with which Egyptian deity? Yes.
The sun.
The sun? Okay. Who was the sun god?
Jesus. God. Pass.
I'll give you half that question. You get 5 points for that, okay? Amun-Ra was the sun god of Egypt. When Pharaoh would not let the Hebrews go, what did God do?
God sent a bunch of 10 plagues, to be exact, onto Egypt, which was trying to show his superiority over their Egyptian gods.
Good job. What was the last plague? What was this called?
The last plague was when God killed the firstborn of the Egyptians, and it's called the Passover.
Good job. It wasn't only the Egyptians, though. It was the firstborn of everything. Cattle, livestock, even Hebrews if they didn't put the blood up. In chapter 13, what did the people of Israel eat to celebrate the Passover?
Bacon.
No.
They ate unleavened bread.
They ate unleavened bread. When Israel left Egypt, how did God guide them? What was the importance of this?
God guided them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And the significance of this is that they didn't know where they were going, but they had to trust God to lead them there.
Good job. They did have to trust God to go to safety. And this runs throughout the entire Pentateuch of this theme of redemption and salvation that we see. After Israel crossed the Red Sea, what was the first nation they battled?
The Appalachians.
No.
They fought the Amalekites.
Yes.
Now, since the Hebrews were slaves to Egyptians, they really didn't know how to fight, but they still won anyway because of God.
Very good, Donald. In chapter 18, Moses' father-in-law gave him advice. What was the advice?
The advice was that Moses should select judges to help the Israelites settle their disputes because Moses couldn't handle all the disputes by himself.
Very good job. What is the purpose of the book of Exodus? Yes, Samuel.
The purpose of the book of Exodus is to show how God is faithful and he redeems his people from slavery, and how he confirms his covenant and gives them laws to show them how they can worship him properly.
There's one more thing, okay? I'm going to give you full marks on this, but he also gives them access to his presence. Over half of Exodus is comprised, or almost half of Exodus is comprised of the building of the temple. In fact, this is, just gave away the next question. So we'll skip that question. What is the Hebrew name of Exodus, and what does it mean?
The Hebrew name of Exodus is Shema, and it means these are the names of.
Very good job, Samuel.
We'll be right back after these messages.
It's almost midnight.
Shouldn't the angel of death be passing over soon?
Yeah, but let me tell you, I sure am glad I slaughtered that pig and smeared his blood on the door for us.
Did you say?
Yes.
Now, back to Sabbath Night Live. Leviticus.
Welcome back once again to Sabbath Night Live. Our third round will be taking place over the book of Leviticus. Here's some title and background. Leviticus receives its name from the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and means relating to the Levites. Although Leviticus does not deal only with the special duties of the Levites, it is also named because it is concerned mainly with the service of worship at the tabernacle. Exodus had given the directions for the building of the tabernacle. Leviticus gives the laws and regulations for worship at the tabernacle, along with instructions on ceremonial cleanliness, moral laws, holy days, the Sabbath year, and the year of Jubilee. The author and date of writing, Leviticus 1:1, states that the contents of Leviticus were given to Moses by God. In more than 50 places in the book, it is said that the Lord spoke to Moses. The key thought of Leviticus is holiness, the holiness of God and the holiness of man. The command to be holy is stated in 11:45, and thus you shall be holy, for I am holy. The instructions or laws in the book were given to help the Israelites worship and live as God's holy people. Some of the instructions deal with such things as offering sacrifices, handling everyday problems concerning cleanliness, and observing special holidays. The Levitical priests were also given a special instructions for making sacrifices and carrying out God's commands. Let's get into the questions. When was the book of Leviticus written? Donald?
Between 1446 and 1406 BC.
Very good job. What is the main theme of Leviticus?
The main theme of Leviticus is that God is holy and he makes his people holy.
Very good. Number 3, what is the purpose of the first 7 chapters of Leviticus?
The purpose of the first 7 chapters is to reveal the sacrificial laws.
Very good job. In chapter 9, after Aaron and his sons are consecrated as priests, they offer a sacrifice. What happens to that sacrifice?
It is consumed by fire.
It is consumed by fire from above. Good job. Why did God kill Nadab and Abihu? Yes.
They offered unauthorized fire and mishandled the service of the ministry.
Very good job. What are chapters 11 through 16 of Leviticus focused on?
We're focused on the purity laws.
Good job. In chapter 11, what are the 2 criteria for an animal to be considered clean? Name one such animal.
It must chew the cud and part the hoof, and it has to do both, and it can't do one. And one such animal is a lamb.
Very good job. What are some animals that were considered unclean? Donald had his hand up first.
I'll let him go first.
Okay.
Humans.
Well, I regret that decision.
Aren't an animal, but yes, unclean. I'll give you 5 points for that. Donald?
Unclean animals are like pigs, camels, badgers, and probably a few others.
All right, good job. What was special about the Levites?
The Levites was the tribe that was set apart to serve as priests, and they were not given land as an inheritance because God was their inheritance.
Very good job, Sam. Well put. How many times does the word holy appear in Leviticus?
12.
Wrong.
I believe it's...
Donald?
I lost my train of thought.
Yes, Ben?
13.
No.
152.
152. The word holiness appears, or the word holy appears 152 times in the book of Leviticus.
We'll be right back after these messages.
I don't like drinking water.
It gives me gas.
Yo, what's up, kids? Are you tired of that bland, boring water you drink all day?
You betcha cheese and crackers.
Don't be a square. Get some hippity hop Mountain Sinai. It's fresh for your lungs, delivered from Mount Sinai itself.
Personally, I am flabbergasted by the idea of such a drink. What you put in this stuff?
It contains 5,000 gazillograms of electrolyte energy and a lot of sugar and caffeine.
That sounds totally tubular and extreme. Yo.
Gag me with a spoon?
Order today and you'll receive a 6-pack of Dr. Moses free!
I don't like drinking Dr. Moses.
It gives me gas.
Mountain Sinai, the best drink out there.
Side effects may include rashing, internal bleeding, loss of hair, outbreak of severe acne, explosive diarrhea, perpetual dabbing, vomiting, excessive amounts of wine flavoring. Do not drink Mount Sinai if you are pregnant or have blonde hair. Consult your dermatologist before trying Mount Sinai. You must be 18 years or older to order.
Now, back to Sabbath Night Live. Numbers.
Welcome back once again to Sabbath Night Live. Our 4th round will be over Numbers. The title and background of this book, the title is Numbers. The book of Numbers gets its name from the 2 numberings or countings of the Israelites during their years of wandering in the wilderness. These countings are found in chapters 1 and 26. Numbers presents an account of that wandering in the wilderness following the establishment of the covenant of Sinai. The author was most likely Moses, along with the rest of the Pentateuch under Mosaic authorship, which we have given evidence towards earlier. The theme and message of this book relates the story of Israel's journey from Mount Sinai to the plains of Moab on the border of Canaan. It tells of the murmuring and rebellion of God's people and of their subsequent judgment. They were condemned to live out their lives in the wilderness. Only their children would enjoy the fulfillment of the promise that had originally been theirs. Throughout the years in the wilderness, one thing came clear to Israel: God's constant care for them. Not only did he meet their needs, but he also loved and forgave his people continually. All right, let's get into the questions. All these questions are worth 20 points.
Wow, that's a lot of
Okay.
numbers.
Yes.
Question 1. Approximately what date was the first census conducted in Numbers? Yes, Ben.
1446.
Ooh. Close.
1445.
Yeah, it was around 1445 BC. Question 2. How many spies were sent into the Promised Land to scope it out? Why were that number?
It was 12 spies, 1 spy for each of the tribes of Israel.
Very good job. Question 3. What happened at Kadesh Barnea? When did it happen?
So like the Israelites, they went into Kadesh Barnea, and they saw some giants there, and they were like, "Oh heck no, we're not going in there." And God said, "No, do it," and they did, and then they started wandering for a good bit.
All right, good deal. I'll give you that answer. One thing was Kadesh Barnea was where the spies reported. It wasn't exactly the Promised Land. That was on the edge of the Promised Land. But I'll give you the 20 points. I'll give you the 20 points mainly because you actually answered my next question. What was the significance of the events that transpired at Kadesh Barnea? People refused to follow God, wandered 40 years in the wilderness. The only two, and the reason they did the wilderness was because God said none of this generation, the Exodus generation, would be able to go into the Promised Land. The only two of them that would be allowed to go into the Promised Land are the two spies that said, yes, we can go in, God is with us, and their names are Joshua and Caleb. Okay? Yes.
Do I get 40 points?
I'll give you 30. All right. What happened when Moses struck the rock in Numbers 20?
Well, first off, God told Moses to speak to the rock so that water could come out. But Moses was so mad with the Israelites that instead he just decided to strike it, and it split open, and water did come out, but because of Moses disobeying God, he was not allowed to go into the Promised Land.
Good job. All right, in chapter 20 of Numbers, both Miriam and Aaron die. On what mountain did Aaron die? Yes, Samuel.
Mount Hor.
Mount Hor, perfect. What did Moses do in Numbers 21, and why was that significant? Yes.
So there were these hot serpents that came into the camp of the Israelites and killing everybody. And so God said to Moses, "Go take this bronze serpent and put it up where people can see it, and they get saved that way." And those who did, they were saved. And that's all I know about this question.
All right, so yes, in Numbers 21, I'll give you points on that. In Numbers 21, fiery serpents came into the camp, started biting people. By fiery serpents, we assume that it means poisonous snakes. They started biting people, they were dying. God was very angry with Israel. Moses intercedes between Israel and God and asks God for a way to fix everything. So God tells him to raise up a bronze serpent where everybody can see it, and if they are bitten and they look to that serpent, okay, they will be healed. Now the significance of this is them having faith in God that looking at the serpent will heal them. Fun fact, the sad thing is later on I believe the Israelites actually turned it into an idol. So, I mean, pretty bad overall. Question 8. What happened with Balaam on his donkey in Numbers 22:22 through 35?
Balaam was on his way to curse the nation of Israel, but then God sent an angel, and when the donkey saw it, it didn't want to move forward, and then Balaam started beating the donkey, and then God opened the mouth of the donkey to speak to him. And then God told Balaam to keep going, but he was only allowed to say what the Lord had given him to say.
Yes, I'll give you points for that. A little more in depth of it. Balaam could not see the angel. The donkey was trying to save him, and when God opened the donkey's mouth, it was like, "What are you doing? I'm trying to save you." And Balaam's eyes were open. He saw the angel standing there, and he turned to God and said, "If it pleases you, I will turn back." God, of course, says, "No, keep on going, but only speak the words which with I give you." Later on, there are blessings from Balaam, and that's what we're going to get to in Numbers 24. And the next question is, what happened with Balaam and the Israelites in Numbers 24? Okay, what kind of blessing came out?
When Balaam was blessing the Israelites, it mentioned a star and a scepter, and this references the promise of the seed in Genesis 3:15. The scepter represents the kingly authority of the Messiah, and the star represents the star that was over Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. And it also mentions that the one to come will crush the heads of human kings, which represents how the Messiah will crush the serpent's head.
All right, good job. Last question. When did the second census, or the census of the new generation, happen?
I believe it was 1406.
It was 1406 BC. Good job, Donald.
We'll be right back after these messages.
Ever since the quail was sent by God, the Israelites have been eating meat non-stop, to the point where meat is coming out of their nostrils. I'm going to Luckily, we have found the solution. Here at Nasal Operation Service Enterprise, also known as NOSE, we have developed a meat removal surgery that can get the meat right out of your nostrils. Sneeze all your meat away.
Now, back to Sabbath Night Live. Deuteronomy.
All right. The book of Deuteronomy means repetition of the law. After 40 years, the Israelites were about to enter Canaan. But before they did, Moses wanted to remind them of their history, all that God had done for them, and the laws they had to continue to obey as God's chosen people. The book itself testifies that for the most part, Moses wrote it. Moses reminds the people of God's goodness to them, how God was with them throughout their journey and gave them the land of Canaan. He also summarizes God's laws, including the Ten Commandments. One subject that pervades the whole book is the love relationship of the Lord to his people, and that of the people to the Lord, their sovereign God. All right, let's get into those questions. All right, these are the questions for Deuteronomy. These are also worth 20 points each. When was the book of Deuteronomy written? Yes, Donald?
Was it 1406 BC?
Yes, it was 1406 BC. What event happened near this time?
The death of Moses.
The death of Moses. Good job. How is Deuteronomy a second telling of the law?
Because Moses is retelling the law to the second generation that is about to enter the promised land. And also, it's confirming God's covenant with the next generation.
All right, good job, Samuel. All right, this is multiple choice. How many sermons is Deuteronomy composed of? A, 1, B, 4, C, 12, or D, 3?
D.
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 A.
Sorry, Ben. It was D. Good job. There were 3 sermons in Deuteronomy. What was the first sermon that Moses did east of the Jordan about? This is found in Deuteronomy chapters 1 through 4.
It's about the past. He was talking about the Israelites, the Exodus, and them in the wilderness.
Yes, good job. All right. What was the second sermon at Beth Peor, east of the Jordan, about? This is found in Deuteronomy chapter 5 through 28.
The second sermon was about the future and telling the Israelites how they should live once Moses was gone.
Right. It was also to explain to them how they were to conduct war in the Promised Land. But good answer, Samuel. What was the third sermon in Moab about? This found in Deuteronomy chapter 29 through 32. Yes.
It was about the present, and Moses was talking to the Israelites about renewing the covenant with the new generation.
Good job. All right, this is another multiple choice in Deuteronomy chapter 31. Who is commissioned to take Moses' place once Israel enters the Promised Land? Your answers are A. Caleb, B. Joshua, C. Aaron, D. Saul.
It was B. Joshua.
B. Joshua.
Be Joshua.
B. Joshua.
Yeah, Joshua.
Joshua. All right, all of you got that question right. Good job. What was the significant event that takes place in Deuteronomy 34, and where does it take place? Samuel.
The death of Moses on Mount Nebo.
The death of Moses on Mount Nebo,
Overlooking the Promised Land.
overlooking the Promised Land. Very good job. All right, your final question. This question is worth 100 points, okay? Explain why this book is foundational to the rest of the Old Testament. Yes, Ben.
So Deuteronomy is foundational to the rest of the Old Testament because it acts as, well, firstly, because it acts as a commentary on the law. And so the newer generation wasn't around for when God gave the Ten Commandments to Moses. So this also acted as Moses and God informing this new generation about the law. And also Moses went into more detail on many of the Ten Commandments, specifically during that Deuteronomy 5 through 28. Secondly, why it's important is that it's quoted multiple times in the Old Testament, over 50 times in the Old Testament, and by Jesus himself during the temptations, when Satan is tempting him in Deuteronomy 6 through 8 is what he quotes from. And so that's also why it's very important. Thirdly, Deuteronomy serves as a warning to the future Israelites when they stray away from God. The prophets quote from Deuteronomy and go back to it and reference it and show how Israelites should be living when they are not. So in total, Deuteronomy is definitely the linchpin of the entire New Testament because it holds everything together, and for all those reasons that I just described, is definitely foundational to the Old Testament, and without it, it would not be able to. We wouldn't be able to explain many of the things that happen later in the Old Testament.
Good job. Very impressed. 100 points to you, Ben.
Hello everyone, it's President Trump. I am here to remind you that Jericho is the greatest city. Let me tell you, it's true. Believe me, it's true. But Jericho is being ruined by the Israelites who are crossing our border illegally. They are taking our jobs and ruining our glorious economy. We need to build a wall, a huge wall, and make the Israelites pay for it. Vote for President Trump. Make Jericho great again.
And the winner is Samuel Peak.
This is an outrage. I'm done.
Runner-up is Ben Ledwinski.
He's the runner-up?